Okay, thank you very much for joining us, Ann McKechin. This is going to be just a quick interview about politics and a few things that we know that you're involved in. Politics.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we'd like to ask you what made you want to become a politician?
I think because I'd had a long interest in politics for a number of years beforehand. I had another job. I was a lawyer in Glasgow, but I'd always been brought up in a political household. I've been involved in campaigning, particularly with Oxfam and then World Development Movement on international issues locally, and so that had actually made me much more interested in politics in general. I then joined the local political party here when I moved into Glasgow and got involved actively, and when the Scottish Parliament was first formed, I stood as a candidate then. I think that's when I got the bug. And then I put my name forward for Westminster, and there was an unexpected candidate from Maryhill stood down, that's Maria Fife, and I got selected as the candidate at the end of March in 2001, and I became an MP in the first week of June. So it all happened at the end very quickly indeed.
And that kind of takes me into the second question. I was going to say, when you were younger, were you always interested in politics?
I think because politics was kind of part of my family life. My father was a local councillor, and he got elected just after I was born, so he was a councillor all the time I was at school. And my mother was a trade union shop steward, so yeah, talking about politics and what was going on in the television and the newspapers was, I mean, every Sunday we used to get 3 newspapers, and I was an only child, and we all sat down and read the newspapers and then talked about it, so it was just part of life.
And what is it you enjoy most about being an MP?
I think it's a chance to meet lots of people from all sorts of backgrounds, here in the constituency, but also down at Parliament, where you meet people from every country in the world, literally. But also the chance to help people. I mean, I think actually being able to help people individually in their cases is a great satisfaction, and it's a great pleasure and a privilege. But I think also the opportunity to actually speak out for people in Parliament and hopefully change things for the better. Sometimes that's tougher when you're in opposition than when you're in government, as I've found out. But trying to help people, that to my mind is the biggest reason why I'm interested in politics.
Great. And obviously Scotland's been it's been a very political country recently. How do you feel politics has changed since the referendum?
I think what was really clear to me in the referendum, speaking to people, whether they were voting no or whether voting yes, is actually the vast majority of people wanted to see real change happening in our country. And actually when you talk to people in other parts of the United Kingdom, that feeling for change is also there too. I think following the bank and financial collapse in 2007, there's a need to really consider how we reconfigure making work fairer, making our banking systems fairer, making the way in which people pay for their public services needs to change. So there's a lot of huge challenges that we all face, and that's why politics has ever been more important.
And I was looking at things you've been involved in recently, and I saw that you were campaigning against the 0-hour contracts.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about what they are and why it is you are against them.
Well, 0-hour contracts have been always around, but they tended to be, for many decades, just a small number of people. For example, people help out actually at elections and as polling day clerks, they'll be in a 0-hour contract. And that's quite understandable. It's just a temporary short-term job for perhaps a few days or a few weeks. But they've now become much more common, and some people are stuck on these contracts for months and years, and they don't know from one week to the next how much income they're going to have and whether they're going to be able to pay their bills. And people very often end up in debt, or they end up with problems trying to access welfare benefits. And actually locally here we found out that a lot of people actually employed at the university as tutors were on 0-hour contracts. And one of the big problems was that they were not allowed under the contract to look for work elsewhere. So they may have work, but then they may find out 1 or 2 weeks or months they might not have any work at all, but they were not permitted to go look for another job. That seemed to me grossly unfair. I've been speaking to the trade unions up at the university, and there's been negotiations about that contract, and that particular clause has now been removed, but I would like to see far fewer people on 0-hour contracts altogether.
And I've also seen that you were involved in the campaign Nation of Lifesavers.
Yes, that's just been, I mean, we get a lot of people coming into Parliament to talk about their particular campaign or interest, but actually I did a life-saving class at Parliament earlier this year with St John's Ambulance, I think probably thinking I was a volunteer at the Commonwealth Games
Yeah,
during the summer, which was great fun. But I think actually it's important for people to actually know life-saving skills, because it can make a real difference. And actually speaking to people in the Red Cross and during an ambulance, you just realise that we can never understand where we might be called upon to actually help someone and actually save their life. And when this scheme came along about actually the lifesaver equipment, I thought it was a really good idea to talk to schools about it, and I've had a really lot of interest from schools last week or so.
And yesterday, obviously, it was Alex Salmond's last Prime Minister's Question Time.
Yes.
How do you feel Nicola Sturgeon will be as the new First Minister?
Well, I obviously won't be in the same parliament as she will. I mean, I think the irony is that Prime Minister Salmond is now seeking a seat back down in Westminster again. So this is his third time coming back. He seems to like it, despite his views in the referendum. I think Nicola Sturgeon is a very able and professional politician. I think she will bring her own, and I think the fact we're going to have our first female First Minister is really a good sign, because sometimes actually the numbers of female representatives into the Scottish Parliament have actually gone down the way since it was first created, and that's not so great news. But I think perhaps if we have a female First Minister, and of course we've got at least one other political party leader, and the Conservative Party is also a female too, which is good. I think it just presents a new and different view of politics. But yeah, I'll follow with interest. I've heard obviously I talk a lot about vision and aspiration, but not in detail, and I think what we will be looking for is a detail on how she's going to deal with some of the problems, such as why we've got 5,000 less teachers in Scotland than we did about 5 years ago. That's a real worry, so I'll be interested to see whether she's going to make a difference in that area too.
And on the note of having a female First Minister, in the next few weeks I'm actually doing a speech about gender equality, and I was looking into the representation of women in Westminster, and it was only around 25%.
It's less than that, yes. No, it really is. I now meet politicians from developing countries all over the world, and they've all got Pakistan and Rwanda and other parts. They've all got far greater female representation. So it remains a really big problem. That's why the Labour Party, which I'm a member, have been making a real effort now for well over a decade to have far more female candidates. And actually, part of the reason why it would be a lot lower at 22% if the Labour Party actually hadn't made a real effort in trying to actually bring women into politics, and most of the female MPs are from the Labour Party. So I think all political parties need to take this issue seriously. Equality is one of the biggest reasons why I'm interested in politics. I was part of a report last year about women in the workplace. So it's not just in politics, but in many other areas, women still are facing barriers, and we need to tackle them.
That's great. And finally, we'd just like to ask you for any young people, I suppose, what advice you would give them if they wanted to get into politics?
Well, I think politics, it's great that people are involved, and it was good that so many people actually took part in the referendum, because I think many politicians have been worried about turnouts in recent years, and I hope people will feel able to participate next year at the general election in the same numbers. But I think actually it's important, if you're interested in political life, to get as wide an experience as possible. I took the old-fashioned route of actually going out and getting a job somewhere else and then coming into politics years later, and I actually think I benefited a lot from that, because I think that's that experience which grounds you, but I also think actually people coming from different walks of life who've done different jobs actually enriches Parliament. So I think it's being interested, you can get involved in different ways. You don't have to always be joining a political party right off, because there are many great campaign organisations running around at the moment. I spent a lot of time working with Oxfam, and I found it really very helpful. They're very good at actually teaching people just basic campaign tactics. So there's lots of ways, even just helping in your local community, helping out with a volunteer charity organisation can be a route into politics.
Okay, thank you very much for coming to speak to us.
No, it's a great pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.